Elias Crow came home to find a stranger in his house, a Chinese woman cooking at his stove like she owned the place. In 1870s Montana, her presence alone could get them both killed. The town would call her an invader. The law wouldn't protect her. And yet, when she turned to face him with steady eyes and set 2 plates on his table, he made the most dangerous choice of his life. He didn't throw her out. This is the story of the woman who crossed every line the frontier drew, and the man who let her. Hit that like button and drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this story travels. The horse knew before Elias did. 3 miles from home, the mare's ears flicked forward, nostrils flaring at something on the wind that didn't belong. Elias Crow tightened his grip on the reins, every muscle in his body going still the way they taught him during the war. That animal awareness that kept you breathing when other men stopped. 23 days on the trail buying cattle from the northern ranches, and now this. His horse telling him something was wrong at the homestead. He urged her forward, slower now, eyes scanning the tree line where ponderosa pines gave way to the clearing he'd carved out of the wilderness 6 years ago. The afternoon sun hung low, turning everything gold and sharp-edged, shadows stretching like fingers across the valley floor. Then he saw it. Smoke. Not the wild kind that meant brush fire or lightning strike. This was chimney smoke rising straight and purposeful from his house. A house that should have been cold and empty, exactly as he'd left it. Elias's jaw tightened. His hand moved to the rifle in its saddle scabbard, fingers wrapping around familiar wood and steel. Out here, 70 miles from the nearest town, visitors didn't just drop by, and the kind that let themselves in weren't the kind you welcomed. He dismounted 50 yards out, ground tying the mare behind a stand of aspen. The Winchester came free with a soft metallic whisper. He'd cleaned it 2 days ago in a line shack while rain hammered the roof. Muscle memory. The kind that didn't fade even when you wanted it to. The house sat quiet in the clearing, looking exactly like it always did. Rough-hewn logs, chinked with mud and moss. A shake-shingle roof that leaked in 2 places he kept meaning to fix. Windows that reflected the sky. Nothing moved. No horses in the corral. No wagon track in the dirt. But that smoke kept rising, steady as a heartbeat. Elias circled wide, approaching from the side where the woodshed gave him cover. His boots made no sound on the needle-soft ground. The war had taught him that too, how to move through space like you weren't there, how to make yourself into something less than a shadow. He pressed his back against the rough logs of the shed, listening. The wind carried something impossible. The smell of cooking. Not just fire, but food. Something with ginger in it, sharp and foreign, cutting through the familiar scent of pine and wood smoke. His heart kicked harder against his ribs. Elias moved to the window, the one on the north side that he never latched, because the wood had swollen, and he told himself he'd fix it come spring. He eased up alongside it, rifle ready, and looked in. The world stopped making sense. A woman stood at his stove. Not any woman he'd expected, not Mary from the trading post or Sarah from the Hendricks ranch. Not even one of the Crow women who sometimes passed through, trading pelts for flour and sugar. This woman was Chinese. She wore clothes that belonged to a different century, a different continent. Silk, the color of storm clouds, embroidered with faded gold threads that caught the lamplight. Her hair was pulled back in a style he had no name for, sleek and dark as wet coal. She moved through his kitchen with an economy of motion that spoke of someone who'd done this work 10,000 times. Reaching for his cast-iron pan, adjusting the heat, stirring whatever was in that pot with a wooden spoon he'd carved himself last winter. 2 plates sat on his table. 2 cups. Like she was expecting him, like she belonged. Elias's finger rested against the trigger guard, but he didn't raise the rifle. Something held him frozen there at the window, watching this impossible thing happen in his house. She wasn't frantic, wasn't looking over her shoulder, wasn't moving like someone who'd broken in and knew she shouldn't be there. She was just cooking dinner. He watched her taste whatever was in that pot, consider it, add something from a small pouch at her belt. The concentration on her face was absolute, professional almost. Like the quality of this meal mattered more than the fact that she was standing in a stranger's house in the middle of nowhere with darkness coming on. The rational part of his brain started cataloging options. Scare her off, march her into town, demand answers at gunpoint, pretend he'd never come home. But underneath all that was something else, something quieter and more unsettling. She'd lit his lamps. All of them. The house glowed like a lantern in the gathering dusk, warm and alive in a way it hadn't been since. He shut that thought down hard. Elias moved to the door, rifle held low now, but ready. His hand found the latch. The metal was cold, familiar. He'd touched the same latch every day for 6 years, coming home to silence and dust, and the kind of solitude that felt less like peace and more like punishment. He pushed the door open. The hinges creaked. He'd been meaning to oil those too. The woman turned, wooden spoon still in her hand, and their eyes met across the length of his small house. She didn't scream, didn't drop the spoon, didn't run. She just looked at him, her face calm and unreadable, and said something in a language he didn't understand. Her voice was low, clear, matter-of-fact, like she was commenting on the weather. Elias stood in his own doorway, rifle in hand, staring at this stranger who'd made herself at home in his house. Up close, he could see she was younger than he'd first thought, maybe 25, maybe 30. Her face had a sharpness to it, all angles and fierce intelligence. Her clothes, for all their foreign elegance, were worn at the edges, travel-stained. Whatever journey had brought her here, it hadn't been easy. "You speak English?" His voice came out rougher than he meant it to. She regarded him for a long moment, then set the spoon down carefully on a plate. His plate, one of the 4 he owned. "Yes?" The word was precise, accented, but clear. "Some. This is my house." "I know." She turned back to the stove, adjusting the heat. "I wait for you." The sheer audacity of it struck him like a physical blow. "You wait for me." "Yes." "Why?" She stirred the pot once more, then moved it off the heat with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. When she turned back to face him, her hands were empty, held slightly away from her body. Not threatening, not defensive, just visible. "I need place to stay," she said. "You have space. You broke into my house." Door was open. She gestured toward the window. "Window too, not safe." He almost laughed at that. This woman lecturing him about safety while standing uninvited in his kitchen. "So you just walked in?" "Yes." "And started cooking?" "You have food. No one cooking. This is—" She paused, searching for the word. "Waste." Elias lowered the rifle, not putting it down, but letting it rest against his leg. He should throw her out, should march her back to wherever she came from, should demand to know how she got here, why she chose his house, what kind of trouble she was running from. Instead, he said, "What's your name?" "Lin May." "I'm Elias Crow. This is my ranch." "I know. Town say Elias Crow, North Ranch. Very far. No wife. I think good place." "Good place for what?" Her eyes met his again, and there was something in them that made him think of winter, cold and vast and unyielding. "To not die." The words hung in the air between them, simple and absolute. Elias had heard men say things like that during the war, in field hospitals and prisoner camps, and the long marches between battles. It was the sound of someone who'd run out of options, who'd stripped away everything but the basic arithmetic of survival. "Where'd you come from?" "Many places." She gestured vaguely east. "Railroad, before that coast, before that—" She stopped, shook her head. "Not matter." "It matters if you're bringing trouble here." "No trouble. Only me." He wanted to believe that. The house smelled better than it had in years. Whatever she was cooking filled the space with warmth and purpose. The lamps were clean, the floor swept, his stack of unwashed dishes gone from the counter. In 20 minutes or an hour or however long she'd been here, she'd done more to make this house feel lived in than he'd managed in months. But this was Montana territory in 1876, and a Chinese woman showing up alone at a white man's ranch meant questions he wasn't prepared to answer, meant gossip that would spread through the valley like wildfire, meant attention from people he'd specifically chosen this location to avoid. "You can't stay here," he said. Lin May nodded as if she'd expected this. "Where I go?" "Town. There's a—" He stopped. There wasn't anything. No boarding house that would take her. No Chinese quarter like the ones he'd heard existed in San Francisco or Denver. The nearest Chinese workers were 60 miles south on the railroad, living in camps that made his rough cabin look like a mansion. "I go to town, they send me away," she said quietly. Or worse. She didn't elaborate on what worse meant, and he didn't ask. He'd seen enough in 38 years to know that the world was full of worse, especially for people who didn't fit in the boxes society built. "How long have you been here?" "Today. I arrived this morning." She moved to the table, picked up one of the plates. "Food is ready. You eat, then decide." The presumption of it should have angered him. Instead, he found himself leaning the rifle against the wall by the door and hanging his hat on its peg. His hands moved through the familiar ritual, unbuckling his gun belt, setting it on the shelf, shrugging out of his coat. Lin Mei watched him without comment, then began serving food onto the plates. Whatever she'd made smelled like nothing he'd ever encountered, savory and complex, with layers he couldn't name. She set one plate at his usual spot at the table, the other across from it, where the light from the window fell. Elias sat, feeling strange in his own chair. She sat across from him, her back straight, hands folded in her lap, waiting. "You're not eating?" he asked. "Guest eat first." "You're the guest. This is my house." Something flickered in her expression. Might have been amusement, might have been pain. "Yes, your house. I cook, so you are guest for dinner." The logic was so twisted he couldn't argue with it. He picked up his fork and tried what she'd made. The flavors hit his tongue like a revelation. Chicken cooked until it fell apart. Vegetables he had no names for. Some kind of sauce that was sweet and sharp and made his mouth water for more. He'd been eating his own cooking for 6 years. Salt pork and beans and the occasional rabbit when he got lucky hunting. This was something else entirely. "This is good," he said, and meant it. She picked up her own fork then, taking small, precise bites. They ate in silence while darkness fell outside and the lamplight made their shadows dance on the walls. Elias tried to make sense of what was happening, tried to form a plan, but his mind kept catching on details. The way she held her fork, the straight line of her spine, the fact that she'd bothered to clean his lamps before lighting them. When the plates were empty, she stood and began clearing the table. He watched her work, efficient and methodical, heating water in the kettle for washing. "Why here?" he asked. "Why my ranch?" She didn't turn from the wash basin. "Towns say Elias Crow is fair man, quiet, not marry, not go to church, not care what other people think." Her hands moved through the soapy water, cleaning his dishes. "I think maybe he not care about Chinese woman." "That's a hell of an assumption." "Yes." She set a clean plate on the drying rack he'd built last spring. "But I have no other choice, so I try." The honesty of it cut through his defenses. He'd come out here to escape people, escape their expectations and judgments, and the way they looked at him after the war. She'd come here for the same reason, just running from different ghosts. "You can stay tonight," he heard himself say. "Tomorrow we figure something else out." Lin Mei's hand stilled in the water. She didn't look at him, but her shoulders dropped slightly, releasing tension he hadn't realized she was carrying. "Thank you. I'll sleep in the barn. You take the bed." "No need. I'm sleeping in the barn." He stood, his chair scraping against the floor. "You lock this door behind me. Don't open it for anyone. Understand?" She turned then, studying his face. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her because she nodded. "I understand." Elias gathered his gun belt, shrugged back into his coat, and took the rifle from beside the door. He paused at the threshold, looking back at this woman who'd upended his carefully constructed solitude in the space of a single evening. "Why didn't you run when I came to the window?" he asked. "You must have known I'd have a gun." Lin Mei met his eyes, and for the first time he saw past the careful control to something raw underneath. "Where I run to? Behind me is ocean. Ahead is only wilderness. This house is—" She paused, choosing words carefully. "This house is the place I stopped running." He wanted to tell her that was foolish, that you could never stop running, that the things chasing you always caught up eventually. But looking at her standing in his kitchen with her worn silk clothes and her spine straight as a rifle barrel, he wondered if maybe she already knew that and had decided to make a stand anyway. "Lock the door," he said again, and stepped out into the night. The barn was cold and smelled like hay and horse, and the particular loneliness of spaces built for company but occupied by one. Elias climbed up to the loft, spread his bedroll on the boards, and lay there staring at the gaps in the roof where stars showed through. His house glowed in the darkness, lamplight spilling from the windows. He could see Lin May's silhouette moving inside, tidying things that didn't need tidying, making herself useful in ways that felt both intrusive and necessary. He should have thrown her out, should have put her on the horse and taken her to town, let Sheriff Brennan deal with whatever trouble she was carrying. Should have protected his isolation, his peace, the careful distance he'd built between himself and the rest of humanity. Instead, he'd let her stay, given her his bed, promised her tomorrow, like tomorrow might bring answers. The horse shifted in her stall below, restless with the change in routine. Elias closed his eyes and tried not to think about how his house had felt with someone else in it, how the silence had texture now, how the smell of that foreign cooking still lingered in his clothes. He'd come home expecting nothing. He'd found something impossible instead. And the worst part, the part that kept him awake long after the lamp in the house went dark, was that some buried piece of him, some part he thought he'd killed in the war, whispered that maybe impossible was exactly what he'd been waiting for. Morning came cold and clear, frost on the ground and breath visible in the air. Elias woke stiff from sleeping on boards, his 40-year-old body reminding him it wasn't 20 anymore. He climbed down from the loft, fed the horse, and stood in the barn doorway trying to decide what the hell he was going to do. The decision got made for him when the house door opened and Lin May stepped out, carrying a cup that steamed in the morning air. She crossed the yard with purpose, her silk clothes looking even more incongruous in the harsh mountain light. She stopped a respectful distance away and held out the cup. Tea. Elias took it, more out of surprise than anything. The liquid was hot and bitter, and nothing like the coffee he usually drank, but it chased the cold from his chest. Thank you. She nodded, arms wrapped around herself against the chill. She wasn't dressed for Montana autumn. That silk might have been warm wherever she came from, but it wouldn't last a week here once the real cold set in. You don't have a coat, he said. I have blanket. That's not going to be enough. He drank more of the tea, thinking, there's a trunk in the loft, my wife's things, winter clothes, you should... He stopped, surprised he'd said it. He never talked about Sarah, never told anyone he'd been married. You should look through it. Take what fits. Lin May's eyes widened slightly. Your wife? She died. Long time ago. He handed back the empty cup. You're about her size. No point in those clothes going to waste. For a moment, something crossed her face that might have been grief recognizing grief. Then she bowed slightly from the waist, a gesture from her world, not his. I am grateful. Don't be grateful yet. We still need to figure out what happens next. I work, she said immediately. I cook, clean, mend clothes, garden. I know many things about growing food, keeping house. I earn place here. It's not about earning. Everything is about earning. Her voice went sharp, the first real emotion he'd heard from her. I have no money, no family, no husband. I have only this. She held up her hands, rough and callous despite the silk sleeves. I work or I die. This is truth. Elias looked at those hands, then at the house behind her. His house that suddenly had clean windows and swept floors and smelled like something other than his own defeat. He thought about the town 7 miles south, about the way people would talk if they knew what was happening here, about Sheriff Brennan and his questions, about the territorial laws that probably had something to say about Chinese laborers, though he'd never paid attention because it hadn't mattered to him before. People are going to have opinions, he said. People always have opinions. This is different. He gestured helplessly. You're Chinese, woman, alone. They'll say things. Let them say. Lin May's chin came up, defiant. I survive railroad camp. I survive men who think Chinese woman is... She stopped, shook her head. I survive worse than talk. The sun was climbing now, burning off the frost, turning the valley into something almost beautiful. Elias had chosen this spot because it was far from everything, because he could go weeks without seeing another human face. Now that distance felt different, not like protection, but like possibility. 1 month, he said. The words came out before he'd fully thought them through. You can stay 1 month. You work. like you said, keep the house, do the cooking. But if trouble comes, if this brings problems I can't handle, you leave. No arguments. Lin Mei studied him for a long moment, and he had the unsettling feeling she was seeing more than he wanted to show. 1 month, she agreed. I make no trouble. You will see. She turned and walked back to the house, her silk catching the morning light. Elias watched her go, wondering what the hell he'd just agreed to, knowing it was probably the stupidest decision he'd made since enlisting in a war that had taken more from him than it could ever give back. The horse nickered behind him, impatient for her morning grain. He went to feed her, to lose himself in the familiar rhythms of ranch work, to pretend his life hadn't just gotten complicated in ways he couldn't predict. But all morning, as he mended fence and checked the cattle and did the 1,000 small tasks that filled his days, he was aware of the house behind him, aware of the woman inside it, moving through his space, rearranging his life in ways he'd said she could, but hadn't really believed would matter. At noon, he came in for water and found fresh bread cooling on the counter. By evening, his shirts were mended and hanging on the line. When darkness fell and he came in from the barn, because she'd made it clear with a look that he was sleeping in his own damn bed and she'd take the floor, dinner was waiting, different from the night before but just as good. They ate in silence again, a silence that was starting to feel less awkward and more like its own kind of communication. When he went to help with dishes, she waved him off with a gesture that was almost irritated, as if his help insulted her ability to do what she'd promised. Elias retreated to his chair by the fireplace, the one he sat in every evening, watching the flames and trying not to think. But thinking was all he could do now. Lin Mei worked in the kitchen, her movements practiced and sure, and he wondered about her story, about the railroad camps she'd survived, about what had driven her here, to his house, to this desperate gamble that a stranger might show mercy. "Lin Mei," he said, and she turned from the wash basin. "That man you asked about in town, the one who told you I was fair, who was it?" She dried her hands carefully. "Store owner, older man. He sell me rice, ask where I stay. I say I need work. He say no one hire Chinese woman here. Then he say—" She paused, choosing words. "He say Crow Ranch far, but Elias Crow is different, not like other men. Maybe try there." Tom Walker. Elias felt something in his chest unclench slightly. Tom was decent as far as townspeople went. If he'd sent her here, maybe he'd also keep his mouth shut about it. He's a good man. Yes, he is kind, but kind is not same as safe. No, Elias agreed. It's not. Lin Mei moved to the fireplace, standing where the warmth could reach her. In the firelight, her face lost some of its sharp edges, becoming younger, more vulnerable. In my country, there is saying, "The willow survives the storm by bending, the oak breaks." You saying you're a willow? I say I am still alive. The oak is not. He thought about that, about survival and what it cost, about the way you had to become something flexible and unbreakable at the same time. He'd tried to be the oak after Sarah died, rigid and alone and unmovable. It hadn't worked. He'd just broken in slower, quieter ways. "You should sleep," he said. "I'll bank the fire." She nodded and moved toward the corner where she'd made herself a bed from the blankets in Sarah's trunk. He'd offered her the bedroom again, but she'd refused with a firmness that told him arguing would be pointless. Elias watched her settle, watched her turn her face to the wall, giving him privacy in his own house. It was strange and unsettling and weirdly considerate, this woman who understood boundaries even as she crossed the biggest one of all by being here. He banked the fire, checked the door, and climbed into his own bed. Through the darkness, he could hear her breathing, soft and even, the sound of another person existing in his space. It should have kept him awake, should have made him anxious. Instead, for the first time in 6 years, Elias Crow fell asleep to the sound of someone else alive in the house and didn't dream about the war. The first week passed in a rhythm that felt both foreign and oddly natural. Elias would wake before dawn, finding Lin Mei already moving in the kitchen, water heating for tea, breakfast taking shape in the cast-iron skillet. She'd hand him food wrapped in cloth, bread and meat, and something she called bao that was unlike anything he'd tasted, and he'd take it out to the far pastures where the cattle grazed. When he returned at dusk, the house would smell like cooking, the lamps would be lit, and she'd have his evening meal ready. They didn't talk much. Lin Mei's English came in careful bursts, and Elias had never been much for conversation anyway. But silence between them started to feel less like awkwardness and more like understanding. Two people who'd learned that words often complicated more than they clarified. On the 8th day, everything changed. Elias was replacing boards on the porch when he heard horses. 3 of them, coming up the valley trail at an easy pace. He straightened, hammer still in his hand, and watched them approach. Sheriff Brennan rode in front, his bulk settling into the saddle like he'd been born there. Behind him came Dutch Morrison and his son Peter, both from the Double M ranch that bordered Elias's land to the south. Dutch was 60 if he was a day, with a beard gone white and eyes that missed nothing. Peter was maybe 25, built like his father, but without the old man's patience. Lin May appeared in the doorway, drawn by the sound. Elias didn't look at her, but he felt her presence there, felt the way the air changed when these 3 men saw her. "Elias!" Brennan reined in his horse, nodding. He was a politician wearing a badge, always calculating angles. "Didn't know you were back from the cattle buying." "Got back last week." Elias set the hammer down carefully, keeping his movements slow and unthreatening. "What brings you out here?" "Heard an interesting story in town." Brennan's eyes slid past Elias to Lin May, then back. "Tom Walker mentioned you might have a visitor." So much for Tom keeping quiet. Elias felt anger flare hot in his chest, but he kept his face neutral. Tom talks too much. Tom talks the right amount when it concerns the law. Brennan shifted in his saddle, leather creaking. Chinese Exclusion Act's been on the books 4 years now. Makes it illegal for Chinese laborers to immigrate. Federal law. "She's not immigrating. She's just passing through." "Passing through for a week?" Dutch Morrison's voice was gravel and doubt. "That's a long pass, Crow." "My property, my business." Peter Morrison spoke up, his voice carrying that edge young men got when they thought they knew how the world should work. "Can't harbor criminals. That's the law too." "She's not a criminal." Elias heard the warning in his own voice, felt his hands curl into fists. "She's just a woman who needed a place to rest." "They're Chinese woman," Peter said, like that explained everything. "Living with a white man, alone. People are talking. Let them talk." "It ain't right, Crow." Dutch shook his head slowly. "I got nothing against the Chinese. Worked with plenty on the railroad. But this ain't San Francisco. This is Montana. We got ways things are done." Brennan held up a hand playing peacemaker. "Nobody's saying you meant harm, Elias. But the situation's complicated. Best thing would be if the woman moved on. Today." Behind him, Elias heard Lin May take a breath, heard the soft sound of her stepping back into the house, running or hiding or just removing herself from the line of fire. He couldn't tell which. "She's not breaking any law," Elias said carefully. "She's working for room and board. That's legal." "You paying her wages?" "Didn't say that." "Then she's a squatter, or she's something else." Peter's implication hung in the air like smoke. Elias took a step forward, and all 3 men tensed. "Say what you mean, boy." "Easy." Brennan's hand moved to his gun belt. Not threatening yet, but close. "Peter, shut your mouth. Elias, I'm trying to help you here. You're a war veteran. You served. People respect that. But if you push this, if you insist on keeping a Chinese woman in your house, that respect's going to evaporate. You understand what I'm telling you? I understand you're trying to tell me what to do on my own land. I'm trying to keep you out of trouble." "I don't recall asking for your help." Dutch Morrison sighed, the sound of a man who'd seen this play before and knew how it ended. "Elias, be reasonable. She can't stay here. It's not about right or wrong. It's about what people will tolerate, and they won't tolerate this." "Then they don't have to look." "They're already looking," Brennan said flatly. "Tom wasn't the only one who saw her in town. Word spread. I've got 3 families asking me when I'm going to do something about the situation. By next week, it'll be 10. By the end of the month, I'll have the territorial governor asking questions I don't want to answer." Elias felt trapped, backed into a corner by laws and customs and the sheer weight of other people's opinions. He'd built this place to escape exactly this: the constant judgment, the rules that made no sense, the way society pressed down on you until you either bent or broke. 1 month, he heard himself say. "I told her she could stay 1 month. I'm a man of my word." Your word doesn't trump federal law. Federal law says Chinese laborers can't immigrate. She's not immigrating. She's already here. And she's not laboring in any mine or railroad. She's keeping house on private property. Show me the law that says that's illegal. Brennan's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not on his own turf. You want to play lawyer with me, Crow? Fine. But when this blows back on you, don't come crying to my office. Wasn't planning to. The three men sat their horses, and Elias could see them calculating how hard to push, whether this was worth the fight, what the cost would be of forcing the issue. Dutch looked tired, like he'd rather be anywhere else. Peter looked angry, that righteous fury of youth that hadn't yet learned when to back down. Brennan just looked political, weighing votes and consequences. 1 month, Brennan said finally. That's what you're claiming. So on November 1st, she's gone. I come back here and find her still living in your house. I'll arrest her for vagrancy and you for harboring. We clear? Crystal. Good. Brennan turned his horse, then paused. For what it's worth, Elias, I hope you know what you're doing. Because I don't think you do. They rode off, 3 men on horseback disappearing down the valley trail. Elias watched until they were out of sight, his heart hammering in his chest, anger and fear mixing into something that tasted like metal. Lin Mei emerged from the house, her face carefully blank. They will come back. Probably. Before 1 month. Maybe. She moved to stand beside him, looking at the empty trail. I should go. Tonight, before more trouble. Where? She didn't answer because they both knew there was no good answer. No safe place for a Chinese woman alone in Montana territory. No town that would welcome her. No ranch that would hire her. She'd end up on the railroad again, or worse, in one of the camps where women disappeared and no one asked questions. You stay, Elias said. I made a promise. 1 month. Promise is not worth your life. My life's not worth much anyway. He picked up the hammer, looked at the half-finished porch repair. Besides, Brennan's not going to do anything. He just wants to look like he tried. The young one. He wants to do something. Elias had caught that too, the way Peter Morrison looked at Lin Mei, like she was a problem that needed solving or a threat that needed eliminating. Young men like that were dangerous. They believed in simple solutions, in drawing lines and defending them, and making the world match their idea of how it should be. Peter's all talk. Talk becomes action. Lin Mei turned to him, and her eyes were fierce. I know this. I see it before. Men talk, then they act. Then women disappear. The weight in those words told him more about her past than anything she'd said directly. Elias wanted to ask, wanted to understand what she'd survived to get here. But the set of her shoulders said she wasn't ready to share that story, and he respected boundaries too much to push. If anyone comes here looking for trouble, they'll find it, he said. But they'll find it from me, not you. Understand? She studied his face for a long moment. Why you do this? You don't know me. I am nothing to you. You're someone who needed help. That's enough. Is not enough, not in this world. Maybe it should be. Lin Mei shook her head slowly, but something in her expression softened. You are a strange man, Elias Crow. So I've been told. She went back inside and he returned to fixing the porch, driving nails with more force than necessary, working off the anger and fear that had nowhere else to go. The afternoon stretched long and tense, the sun crawling across the sky while Elias waited for something else to happen. But nothing did. The valley stayed quiet. The cattle grazed. The wind moved through the pines like it always had, indifferent to human drama. By evening, the tension had faded to a dull ache in his chest. They ate dinner in the usual silence, but it felt different now, charged with awareness that their time was limited, that forces beyond this house were already moving to separate them. After the dishes were clean, Lin Mei surprised him by sitting in the chair opposite his, the one no one had used since Sarah died. She folded her hands in her lap, back straight, and looked at him with that direct gaze that always made him feel like she could see past whatever walls he'd built. I tell you my story, she said. Then you understand why I not leave. Elias wanted to say she didn't owe him explanations, but he could see she needed to say this. So he nodded and waited. I come from Guangdong province, small village. My father is merchant, not rich but not poor. He teach me read, write, keep books for his business. This is... She paused, searching for words. This is not common for girl, but he have no sons, so he teach me. She stared at the fire, and Elias could see her traveling back through years and miles to another life. When I am 18, there is flood. Very bad. Crops fail, people starve. My father lose everything. He borrow money from... She gestured helplessly. I don't know English word. Men who loan money but take more back. Loan sharks. Yes, sharks. They say father must pay, but he have nothing, so they say your daughter. She can work in America, make money, pay debt. Her voice went flat, emotionless, the way people talked about trauma when the alternative was breaking apart. My father say no, but I say yes, because if I not go, they kill him. Elias felt cold settling into his bones. He'd heard stories like this before, knew where they usually led. They bring me to San Francisco, 1872. Say I work in restaurant, but is not restaurant. Is, she stopped, swallowed hard. Is place where men come, where women must... She looked at him, her eyes fierce and ashamed and defiant all at once. You understand? I understand. I stay 2 years. Every night, different men. They say I pay debt, but debt only grow. They take money, say is for food, for room. I am prisoner. She fell silent for a moment, and Elias wanted to tell her she could stop, that he'd heard enough. But this was her story to tell, and she'd clearly decided it was time. One night, there is fight. 2 men argue over woman. Guns. 1 man die. In chaos, 3 of us run, out the door, into street. We separate. I run until I cannot run more. How'd you survive? I steal. I hide. I do anything to not go back. She met his eyes. You think I am bad person. I steal. I don't think that. Why not? Everyone else think this. Because surviving isn't a crime. It's just hard. Lin May blinked, and for the first time since he'd met her, her careful control cracked slightly. She looked away toward the fire, and he saw her throat work as she swallowed emotion. I work on railroad for 1 year, she continued, voice steadier now. Cook for Chinese workers. Is hard work, but honest. Men leave me alone because I am good cook, and cook is important. But then railroad finish section. Workers move or go home. No more job. So you came here. I hear about Montana. Empty land. Not many people. I think maybe I hide here. Maybe I start new life where no one know my shame. She looked at him again. Then I come to town and everyone stare. Everyone whisper. Chinese woman alone. They know what I am. Or they think they know. You're not what they think. Does not matter. They believe what they want to believe. She leaned forward slightly. So when Tom Walker say Elias Crow is different, I think, last chance. I find your house. I see as empty. I think I make myself useful. Maybe he let me stay small time. Maybe long enough to plan next place. But there is no next place. No. The word came out small, defeated. There is only here, or there is death. These are my choices. Elias sat with that for a long moment, understanding now why she'd walked into his house like she had every right to be there. It wasn't arrogance. It was desperation masquerading as confidence. It was the last gamble of someone who'd run out of cards to play. You're not going to die, he said. You cannot promise this. I can promise I won't let those men run you off my land. That's worth something. Lin May studied him, and he could see her trying to understand why he'd put himself between her and the world. He wasn't sure he could explain it, wasn't sure he understood it himself. Maybe it was just that he recognized something in her, that same bone-deep weariness he felt, that same sense of being done with running but having nowhere to stop. In my country, she said quietly, there is saying, when you save someone's life, you become responsible for them forever. I didn't save your life. You give me place when no one else will. Is same thing. She stood, smoothing her silk tunic. I work hard. I make your life easier. This is how I pay debt. You don't owe me anything. I owe you everything. She moved toward her sleeping corner, then paused. 1 month is not long enough to pay this debt. 1 month is what we have. She nodded, accepting this, and settled into her blankets. Elias stayed by the fire, staring at the flames and thinking about debts, the ones you chose and the ones that chose you. He'd spent 6 years trying to pay off a debt to Sarah, trying to earn the right to still be alive when she wasn't. He wasn't sure it was working. Maybe that's why Lin Mei's presence didn't bother him the way it should. Maybe it was easier to carry someone else's burden than to keep carrying your own alone. The fire burned down to coals. The house creaked and settled. Outside, the Montana night pressed close, full of stars and silence, and the particular emptiness of places where humans were temporary and the land was forever. Elias finally went to bed, but sleep came slow. He kept thinking about what Brennan had said, about Peter Morrison's anger, about the way Lin Mei had looked when she'd said, "There is only here or there is death." He'd promised her 1 month. But a month was just numbers on a calendar. It didn't solve anything. It just delayed the inevitable. Unless. The thought came to him in the dark, so audacious he almost laughed at himself for thinking it. But once it was there, he couldn't unthink it. Couldn't unsee the solution that was obvious and impossible and maybe the only way forward. He'd think about it tomorrow. Consider the angles. Figure out if he was brave enough or foolish enough to try it. But as he drifted towards sleep, listening to Lin Mei breathe across the room, Elias Crow started planning how to turn 1 month into forever. The next morning brought rain, that cold October rain that meant winter was coming, that the easy season was ending. Elias went out to check the cattle and came back soaked through, his fingers numb. Lin Mei had hot tea waiting and towels by the fire. She'd learned his routines fast, anticipated his needs before he knew he had them. "We need to talk," he said, warming his hands on the cup. She looked up from the bread dough she was kneading. "About leaving. About staying." Her hands stilled. 1 month, we agree. "I've been thinking about that." He set the cup down, choosing words carefully. "There's a way you could stay longer. Legal way. Way that would make Brennan and Morrison and all the rest of them leave us alone." "What way?" He almost couldn't say it, almost chickened out and changed the subject. But he'd thought about it all night, looked at it from every angle, and kept coming back to the same conclusion. It was crazy, but it might work. "You could marry me." Lin Mei dropped the dough. It hit the table with the soft thud, and she stared at him like he'd spoken in a language she didn't understand. "Marry? It's legal. If you're married to a citizen, the Exclusion Act doesn't apply. You'd be protected. No one could force you to leave." "You want to marry me?" Her voice was flat, disbelieving. "You know me 10 days. I'm not talking about a real marriage. Just paper. Legal protection. You'd still sleep there." He gestured to her corner. "I'd still sleep in my bed. Nothing would change except the law would be on our side." She picked up the dough, started kneading again with jerky movements. He could see her thinking, processing, trying to find the trap. "Why you do this?" "Because it's practical. You need protection. I can provide it. Simple as that." "Nothing is simple." She shaped the dough with hard, precise movements. "Marriage is serious, is forever." "Not necessarily. We could divorce later if you wanted, once you're established, once it's safe." "Safe?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "There is no safe for women like me. You know this." "Maybe not. But there's legal. There's legitimate. There's a reason for people to leave you alone that doesn't depend on my good graces or Brennan's patience." He stood up, moved closer. "Look, I'm not asking for anything from you. Not your affection, not your—" He stopped, feeling his face heat. "Not anything. Just a signature on paper, partnership, agreement, whatever you want to call it." Lin Mei was quiet for a long time, her hands moving through the dough in rhythms that looked like meditation. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. "You lose respect. In town. They already whisper. If you marry Chinese woman, they will say worse things. Let them. You will be outcast, like me. I'm already an outcast. That's why I live out here." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and he felt exposed under that gaze. "This is not small thing, Elias Crow. This changes your life." "My life could use changing." "Why? What are you running from?" The question caught him off guard. He'd been so focused on her story, he'd forgotten she might be curious about his. "That's not relevant." Is relevant if we marry, even paper marriage, I should know. Fair point. Elias moved back to his chair, suddenly tired. The rain hammered the roof, a steady drumming that made the house feel smaller and more intimate than usual. I was married before, he said. For real. Her name was Sarah. We met in Pennsylvania before the war. Got married young. I was 22, she was 19. Thought we'd have forever. She died. She died giving birth, the baby too. 1867. I was still out west with the army. Didn't even know she was pregnant. Got the telegram 3 months after it happened. Lin May's hands had stopped moving. I am sorry. I came back to nothing. Empty house, empty life. Stayed drunk for a year, then came out here to Montana to get away from all the emptiness. Built this place with my own hands. Told myself I was starting over. But I wasn't. I was just running from ghosts. He looked at the fire. So when you ask what I'm running from, that's the answer. I'm running from the fact that I'm still alive and they're not, and I don't know what to do with that. The silence stretched between them, heavy with shared understanding of loss. So this marriage, Lin May said finally, is not about me. Is about you trying to save someone this time. Her insight cut close to the bone. Maybe. Does it matter? Yes. Because I am not ghost. I am not replacement for dead wife. I am real person with real problems. If you marry me because you feel guilty about past, this will not work. I'm not trying to replace Sarah. I'm trying to help you. Those are different things. Are they? She began shaping the dough into loaves. You are a lonely man. I am desperate woman. This is not good foundation for any marriage, even paper marriage. What would be a good foundation? Respect, honesty, knowing what we each want and agreeing to it clearly. She covered the loaves with a cloth. You say nothing changes, but everything changes. Town will treat you different. Law will see us as unit. If I make trouble, you're trouble too. If you decide you want real wife someday, you cannot. Already have wife. I'm not going to want that. You say this now. In 5 years, 10, you change mind but stuck with Chinese wife you marry because you feel sorry for her. Elias stood up, frustration finally breaking through. You want me to take it back? Want me to say forget it, figure it out yourself? Because I can do that. I can let the clock run down on our month and wave goodbye when Brennan shows up to arrest you. That what you want? I want to understand why. Her voice rose to match his, that careful control finally cracking. I want to know why man who lives alone, who avoids town, who builds walls around himself, why he offers marriage to stranger, is not make sense. Because I'm tired. The words ripped out of him, raw and honest. I'm tired of living like I'm already dead. I'm tired of this house being a tomb. I'm tired of pretending that isolation is peace, when really it's just slow suicide. You walked in here and for the first time in 6 years, I felt like I was actually living instead of just waiting to die. And maybe that's selfish. Maybe that makes me the worst kind of person for offering this. But there it is. The truth. Lin May stared at him, her chest rising and falling with quick breaths. The rain kept drumming. The fire kept crackling. The moment hung between them like something breakable. This is honest, she said finally. This is honest. You offer marriage because you're lonely. I offer marriage because we both need something, and maybe together we have better chance than apart. You need legal protection. I need... He stopped, then forced himself to finish. I need a reason to keep going. Partnership gives us both that. She crossed her arms, thinking. If I agree, we make rules, clear rules. You sleep your bed, I sleep my corner. No... She gestured vaguely, her face coloring. No husband rights, just house sharing. Understood? Understood. I work. You pay me small wage. Not much, but something. So I have independence. Fine. And if someday I want to leave, want real life somewhere else, you let me go. You give divorce. No questions. That one hit harder than he expected, the idea of her leaving, but he nodded. Agreed. Lin May was quiet for another long moment, her eyes searching his face for something he wasn't sure he was showing. Finally, she said, This is craziest thing I ever do, and I do many crazy things to survive. Is that a yes? Is a yes. But we do this right. We go to town. We tell sheriff our plan before we marry so he cannot say we hide something. We make him witness. Make it all, she waved her hand, all official and clear. Brennan's not going to like this. Brennan already not like this. But if we do everything legal, what can he say? She had a point. He had a sitochishked. If they played it straight, documented everything, made it a legitimate business arrangement, there was nothing Brennan could do except disapprove. And disapproval didn't carry the weight of law. We go tomorrow, Elias decided. Early, before I change my mind or you come to your senses. Too late for senses. Lin Mei turned back to her bread, but he caught the hint of something that might have been a smile. Already agreed to marry stranger. Senses are gone. The rain continued through the evening, turning the world outside into gray sheets of water. They ate dinner in a strange new awareness, not quite comfortable, but not quite awkward either, more like two people standing at the edge of something irreversible, trying to convince themselves to jump. That night, lying in his bed while Lin Mei settled into her corner, Elias wondered if he'd lost his mind. Marriage, even a paper one, was serious, permanent, at least until it wasn't. And he barely knew this woman. But then he thought about the alternative. Watching her walk away in 3 weeks, knowing she was heading toward nothing good, or worse, watching Brennan take her in irons while he stood by helpless. No, this was better. Crazy, but better. Elias? Her voice came soft through the darkness. Yeah? Thank you for this chance. Don't thank me yet. We might both regret it. Maybe. A pause. But maybe not. He fell asleep to the rain and the sound of her breathing and dreamed of Sarah not with guilt this time, but with something that felt almost like permission. Tomorrow they'd go to town. Tomorrow they'd start a scandal that would ripple through the valley for years. Tomorrow they'd bind themselves to each other with legal words that meant everything and nothing. But tonight the rain drummed on and the fire burned low, and two people who'd been running from different ghosts found themselves running together instead, toward something neither of them could name, but both of them desperately needed. Morning came too fast and too slow at the same time. Elias woke before dawn, his stomach tight with the kind of nerves he hadn't felt since the war. Lin Mei was already up, dressed in the best of Sarah's old clothes, a dark blue wool dress that fit her reasonably well, though she'd had to take in the waist. She'd pinned her hair differently, trying for something that might pass as respectable in town. You ready for this? He asked. No. She handed him coffee, her hand steady even if her voice wasn't quite. But we go anyway. They hitched the wagon in silence, the morning cold enough to make their breath visible. The sky was that pale gray that came before sunrise, stars fading into nothing, into nothing. Lin Mei climbed up beside him, sitting stiff and straight, her hands folded in her lap. The 7-mile ride to town felt longer than it should have. Neither of them talked much. What was there to say? They were about to walk into the sheriff's office and announce they were getting married, a white rancher and a Chinese woman who'd known each other less than 2 weeks. It was going to cause exactly the kind of scene Elias had spent 6 years avoiding. The town of Millerville wasn't much, maybe 300 people on a good day, spread along a single main street with a handful of cross streets branching off like broken ribs. There was Walker's General Store, the Silver Dollar Saloon, a boarding house that also served as a restaurant, the sheriff's office, and a church that doubled as a schoolhouse. Everything else was houses and hope. They arrived just after 8, early enough that the street was mostly empty. A few people were out. Mrs. Henderson sweeping her porch, old Jack Fleming heading toward the saloon despite the hour, and every single one of them stopped to stare at the Chinese woman sitting beside Elias Crow in his wagon. He could feel Lin Mei shrinking beside him, making herself smaller. He wanted to tell her to sit up straight, to meet their stares with that fierce pride he'd seen in her, but he understood the instinct to disappear. He'd felt it himself often enough. Elias pulled the wagon up in front of the sheriff's office and set the brake. Stay close to me. I know. She climbed down, her movements careful and deliberate, giving no one reason to criticize. He came around and offered his arm, surprising himself. She looked at it for a moment, then took it, her hand light on his sleeve. They walked into the office together. Sheriff Brennan looked up from his desk, his face going from bored to alert in an instant. He was alone. No deputies, no witnesses, Just him and a cup of coffee that had probably gone cold an hour ago. Crow, didn't expect to see you back so soon. Got something to discuss. Elias guided Lin Mei to the chair opposite Brennan's desk, then remained standing beside her. Official business. Brennan's eyes moved between them, already suspicious. What kind of business? We're getting married. Want you to witness it and file the paperwork. Make it all legal and proper. The silence that followed was so complete Elias could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Brennan's face went through several expressions: surprise, disbelief, calculation, anger, before settling on a kind of weary resignation. You're joking. Do I look like I'm joking? You look like you've lost your damn mind. Brennan leaned back in his chair, studying them both. You've known this woman, what, 10 days? And you want to marry her? 11 days. And yes, why? Because I want to, Elias said flatly. That's reason enough. It's not reason enough when you're asking me to be part of it, Brennan pointed at Lin Mei. You know what people are going to say? You know the kind of questions I'm going to have to answer. I know you don't have legal grounds to stop us. Marriage between a citizen and a foreign national is permitted under territorial law. I checked. Brennan's jaw tightened. You checked. I checked. I rode to Helena last week, talked to a lawyer. He confirmed it. As long as we're both consenting adults and follow proper procedure, there's nothing illegal about it. The Chinese Exclusion Act doesn't prohibit marriage, just labor immigration. Once we're married, she's protected. Protected. Brennan laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. You think a piece of paper is going to protect her from what's coming? From the way people are going to talk? From Peter Morrison and his friends who already think she shouldn't be here? Paper's better than nothing. Paper's kindling, Crow, and you're about to light a match. Brennan looked at Lin Mei, his expression unreadable. You understand what you're getting into, miss. You understand that marrying this man isn't going to make you welcome here. It's going to make things worse, not better. Lin Mei met his gaze without flinching. I understand. I marry him anyway. Why? What's he offering you that's worth this? Safety, respect, chance. Her English was careful but clear. More than I have now. You could go to San Francisco, find your own people there. Wouldn't have to deal with... He gestured vaguely at the walls, meaning the town beyond them. All this. San Francisco is where I run from. I not go back. Something in her voice made Brennan pause. He looked at her more closely, seeing past the surface to whatever history she carried. His expression softened slightly, though his tone stayed hard. This is a mistake. For both of you. Maybe, Elias said. But it's our mistake to make. Brennan drummed his fingers on the desk, thinking. The clock kept ticking. Outside, they could hear voices, people moving along the street, starting their day, unaware that the foundations of their small world were about to shift. If I do this, Brennan said finally, I want it on record that I advised against it. That I told you both this was a bad idea, and you proceeded anyway. Fine. And I want you to know that I can't protect you from what happens after. People are going to be angry. They're going to say things, do things. If violence comes to your door, don't expect me to stop it. Never expected that anyway. Brennan stood up, moving to a cabinet where he kept official documents. You'll need witnesses, 2 of them besides me, and you'll need to file with the territorial registrar, which means a trip to Helena. We can do that. I'm sure you can. Brennan pulled out a form, set it on the desk. But first you need to find 2 people in this town willing to witness a white man marrying a Chinese woman. Good luck with that. It was a challenge and a test, and they both knew it. Elias thought about who he could ask. The list was short. Most people in Millerville kept their distance from him already. Adding controversy wasn't going to help. Tom Walker, he said. I'll ask him. Tom's got a business to run. He might not want to risk it. I'll ask anyway. And for the second, Elias had no idea. He looked at Lin Mei, who shook her head slightly. She had no connections here, no one who owed her favors or goodwill. They were starting from nothing. We'll find someone, Elias said, more confident than he felt. You've got until this afternoon. I'm not holding this form forever. Brennan sat back down, his message clear. Get out of my office. They left, stepping back into the morning sunlight that felt too bright after the dim interior. A small crowd had gathered, not much, maybe 10 people, but enough to make Lin May tense beside him. Mrs. Henderson was there, and the Fletcher brothers who ran the livery, and Sarah Murphy who taught school when she wasn't gossiping, which was rarely. "Is it true?" Sarah called out, her voice carrying across the street. "Are you really marrying her?" Elias didn't answer, just guided Lin May toward Walker's General Store. The crowd followed at a distance, murmuring among themselves like a jury that had already reached a verdict. Tom Walker was behind the counter when they entered, organizing stock. He looked up, saw them, and his face went carefully neutral. "Elias, Miss Lynn. Tom, got a favor to ask." "I'm listening." "We're getting married. Need witnesses. Hoping you'd be one of them." Tom set down the box he'd been holding, taking his time about it. He was a careful man, methodical, the kind who thought 3 moves ahead in every situation. Elias could practically see him calculating the cost. "That's a big ask," Tom said quietly. "I know. People are already talking about me sending her to your ranch. If I witness this marriage, they're going to say I encouraged it, facilitated it. Are they wrong?" Tom's mouth twitched, might have been a smile. "No, they're not wrong. I did send her to you. Thought you could use the company, and she clearly needed somewhere safe." He looked at Lin May. "Didn't expect it to go this far." "Neither did we," Elias admitted. "But here you are." "Here we are." Tom was quiet for a moment, then sighed. "My wife's going to have words about this. Strong words." "But you'll do it?" "I'll do it." Tom came around the counter. "Not because I think it's a good idea. I think it's probably the worst idea you've had since you decided to homestead 70 miles from civilization. But I'll do it because you asked, and because sometimes people deserve a chance even when the odds are against them." Relief flooded through Elias, surprising in its intensity. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. We still need a second witness, and I can't think of anyone in this town foolish enough or kind enough to volunteer." The door opened behind them, bell chiming. They all turned to see who'd entered. It was Dutch Morrison. The old rancher stood in the doorway, his white beard catching the light, his eyes moving from Elias to Lin May to Tom and back again. The silence stretched uncomfortable and long. "Heard you were in town," Dutch said finally, addressing Elias. "Heard why too. Word travels fast." "I guess it does." Dutch stepped fully inside, closing the door behind him. "I came to tell you you're making a mistake. You and everyone else. But I also came to say—" Dutch paused, choosing words carefully. "I also came to say that it's your mistake to make, and if you're determined to make it, you might as well do it right." Elias wasn't sure he'd heard correctly. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'll be your second witness." The words hung in the air, impossible and generous and completely unexpected. Tom looked as shocked as Elias felt. Lin May's hand tightened on Elias's arm. "Why?" Elias asked, because he had to know. Dutch moved closer, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. "Because 30 years ago, I married a crow woman. Her name was Morningbird. We had 10 good years together before the fever took her. My son Peter doesn't know. His mother was my second wife, white woman from back east. But I know what it's like to love someone the world says you shouldn't. I know what it costs." The revelation shifted everything. Elias had known Dutch for years, never suspected this history. No one had. Dutch had kept it buried, hidden beneath respectability and white marriage, and the careful construction of acceptable identity. "I'm not saying I approve," Dutch continued. "I'm not saying this is going to end well, but I am saying that if you're going to buck the system, you deserve to have someone stand with you who understands what you're facing. So I'll witness your marriage. And then I'll go home and tell my son he needs to keep his mouth shut and his hands to himself, or he'll answer to me." "Dutch, Elias didn't have words big enough for what he was feeling. "Don't. Just—" Dutch waved a hand, dismissing sentiment. "Just do this thing legal and proper, so no one can say you snuck around. Be honest about it. That's the only way you survive what's coming." So they did it honestly. The 4 of them walked back to the sheriff's office together. And if the small crowd that had gathered looked confused to see Dutch Morrison in the group, they kept their questions to themselves. Brennan's face when they entered with 2 witnesses was worth preserving. Surprise and respect fighting for dominance. You found people willing to sign, Brennan said. We found people with courage, Tom corrected quietly. The ceremony was brief and bureaucratic, no romance or sentiment involved. Brennan read the legal requirements in a monotone voice, asked if they both consented, marked the form when they said yes. Tom and Dutch signed as witnesses. Brennan added his own signature and seal, making it official. That's it, Brennan said, handing Elias the document. You're married, in the eyes of the law, anyway. Might want to find a preacher if you want it blessed. But legally speaking, you're done. Elias looked at the paper. His name and Lin May's written there in black ink, witnessed and sealed. It felt surreal, like something happening to someone else. Lin May stood beside him, her face carefully composed, revealing nothing of what she might be feeling. Thank you, Elias said to all of them. Brennan for doing his job despite his objections, Tom and Dutch for their courage. Don't thank me, Brennan said. Thank me when you survive the next 6 months without someone burning down your ranch. They left the office, stepping back into a town that suddenly felt hostile. The crowd had grown, maybe 30 people now, watching from storefronts and street corners. Word had spread. Everyone knew. Peter Morrison pushed through the crowd, his young face twisted with anger and betrayal. Pa, what the hell were you thinking? Watch your mouth, boy. You witnessed this? You signed your name to this? I did. And you'll respect it, or you'll find somewhere else to live. Father and son stared at each other, generations of expectation and rebellion compressed into a single moment. Finally, Peter spun away, shouldering through the crowd, leaving silence in his wake. Dutch watched him go, his face tired. That could have gone better. Could have gone worse, Tom offered. They stood there, 4 people on the street outside a sheriff's office, holding a piece of paper that changed everything and nothing. Lin May was quiet, her hand still on Elias's arm, and he wondered what she was thinking, if she regretted it already, if she understood the magnitude of what they'd just done. We should head back, Elias said. Long ride home. You're going to need supplies, Tom said. Come by the store. I'll set you up. Consider it a wedding present. They followed Tom back to the general store, aware of every eye watching them, every whispered conversation stopping as they passed. Inside, Tom loaded them up with flour and sugar and coffee and 100 other things, refusing payment despite Elias's protests. Just take care of each other, Tom said. That's payment enough. Lin May surprised everyone by bowing to Tom, that formal gesture from her culture that carried weight and meaning. You are good man. I not forget this kindness. Tom's face colored slightly. Yeah, well, don't make me regret it. They loaded the supplies into the wagon, and Dutch helped secure the load. He moved slowly, deliberately, and Elias realized the old rancher was stalling, giving Peter time to cool down, or giving himself time to process what he'd just done. Morrison, Elias said quietly. About Morningbird. Don't! Dutch tightened a rope with more force than necessary. That's buried history. Let it stay buried. But Peter should know Peter should figure out how to be his own man instead of trying to be what he thinks the world wants. Maybe watching you two will teach him that. Maybe it won't. Either way, it's not your problem. Dutch finished with the ropes and stepped back. He looked at Lin May directly for the first time, really seeing her. You've got spine, girl. You're going to need it. I have it, she said simply. Good. Because that ranch is isolated and winter's coming. You'll be trapped out there together for months with nothing but each other for company. That's when you'll find out if this was wise or foolish. We find out together, Lin May said, and something in her voice made Dutch nod with what might have been approval. They said their goodbyes and climbed into the wagon. Elias released the brake and guided the horses back toward the main street, toward the edge of town, toward home. The crowd watched them go, silent now, witnessing the departure of something they didn't understand and weren't sure they wanted to. Just before they left town, Elias saw Sarah Murphy standing on the schoolhouse steps. She caught his eye and shook her head slowly, sadly, like she was watching a funeral procession. Maybe she was. Maybe this was the death of his reputation, his standing, whatever small acceptance he'd managed to build in 6 years of careful distance. But when he looked at Lin May beside him, sitting straighter now that they were leaving, her face turned toward the open country ahead, he He found he didn't care as much as he thought he would. The ride back was quieter than the ride in. The morning had taken something from both of them: energy, certainty, the comfortable illusion that they knew what they were doing. They'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, made a choice that would echo through whatever years they had left. "You regret it?" Elias asked when they were miles from town, the valley opening up around them. Lin Mei was quiet for a long time. "Ask me in 1 year." "Fair enough." "You regret?" "Ask me in 1 year." She almost smiled at that. "We are both very stupid or very brave." Probably both. The sun was high by the time they reached the ranch, warming the October air to something almost comfortable. They unloaded the supplies together, working in the companionable silence they'd developed, and Elias noticed how different it felt now. The same actions, carrying flour, stacking canned goods, but weighted with new meaning. They weren't rancher and temporary guest anymore. They were husband and wife, however unconventional, however strange. That night, Lin Mei cooked something special. He didn't know what to call it, but it involved chicken and vegetables and spices that made his mouth water. She set 2 plates at the table like always, but this time she also pulled out a bottle of whiskey he kept in the back of the cupboard. "We celebrate," she said. "Celebrate what?" "We just made ourselves outcasts. We celebrate surviving today. Tomorrow, we survive tomorrow. This is how life works." She poured 2 small glasses and handed him one. He took it, feeling the weight of the day settling into his bones. They raised their glasses and drank, the whiskey burning smooth and familiar. "To survival," Elias said. "To partnership," Lin Mei corrected, "is better word." They ate dinner as the sun set, painting the valley in colors that hurt to look at, gold and orange and that particular shade of pink that only happened in October. Through the window, Elias could see the mountains standing eternal and indifferent, having witnessed a million human dramas and caring about none of them. After dinner, Lin Mei washed dishes while Elias sat by the fire, turning the marriage certificate over in his hands. The paper was crisp and official, stamped with the territorial seal, signed by 4 men who'd taken a risk today. He carefully folded it and put it in the metal box where he kept important documents: the deed to the ranch, his discharge papers from the army, the letter from the hospital about Sarah's death. Lin Mei finished in the kitchen and came to sit in the chair opposite his. She'd changed out of the blue dress into her silk tunic, more comfortable now that they were home. Home. When had he started thinking of it as their home instead of his? "Elias," she said, and he looked up. "I want to say something." "I'm listening." "This marriage is paper, is protection, but is also promise. I promise to keep house, to work hard, to not bring shame." She paused, searching for words. "But I also promise, if someday you want me to leave, I leave. No fight, no trouble. You free. I don't want you to leave." "Now you don't want, but maybe someday. So I promise, you always free." Elias leaned forward, needing her to understand. "Lin Mei, we made this choice together, both of us. That means we're both responsible for making it work. I'm not going to wake up one day and decide I made a mistake. That's not who I am. You say this now. I say this now and I'll say it in 10 years. I don't break promises. It's the one thing I've got left that's worth anything." He held her gaze. "You're not a burden I'm carrying. You're a partner I chose. There's a difference." She blinked rapidly, and he realized she was fighting tears. "No one ever said this to me before." "Partner?" "Well, that's what you are. What we are to each other." He sat back, uncomfortable with the emotion in the room. "So no more talk about leaving unless you actually want to go. And if that day comes, you tell me honest, and we'll figure it out. But don't leave because you think I want you to. Understand?" "I understand." She wiped her eyes quickly, embarrassed by the display. "You are a strange man, Elias Crow. But maybe strange is what I need. Strange is all I've got to offer." They sat together as the fire burned down, not talking, just existing in the same space. It wasn't romantic or passionate or anything like what Elias had felt with Sarah, but it was real. It was honest. And in a world that seemed determined to grind them both down to nothing, that felt like enough. When Lin Mei finally stood to go to her sleeping corner, Elias surprised himself by saying, "The bed's big enough for 2. If you wanted to, there's a blanket we could hang down the middle, for privacy. You'd be more comfortable than on the floor." She looked at him for a long moment, considering. "You are sure?" "I'm sure. We're married now. Even if it's just paper, might as well act like adults who can share a space without it meaning anything more than shared space." "Okay," she said finally. "I try, but you snore, I move back to floor." "I don't snore. All men snore." "I don't." "We find out tonight." She was right, of course. He did snore, but she didn't move back to the floor. And when Elias woke in the middle of the night, cold and disoriented, he could hear her breathing on the other side of the hanging blanket and found himself grateful for the sound. They'd survived the day, made it through the town's judgment, through the ceremony, through the first evening of being legally bound to each other. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Winter was coming, and with it isolation that would test whatever foundation they'd built. But for tonight, they were safe. They were together. They were partners in the strange and fragile thing they'd created. And if the world wanted to call them foolish or wrong or scandalous, let it. They'd crossed the line. There was no going back. The morning after felt different in ways Elias couldn't quite name. He woke to the sound of Lin Mei already moving in the kitchen, same as every other morning, but now there was a wedding certificate in his document box and a woman on the other side of a hanging blanket who was legally his wife. The strangeness of it settled over him like frost. He found her making breakfast, her movements efficient and practiced. She glanced up when he emerged, and something passed between them, an acknowledgement of the new reality they'd created, fragile and uncertain as spring ice. "Sleep okay?" he asked. "You snore." I was correct, but there was no heat in it, almost amusement. "I'll try to snore quieter." "Is not possible, but I survive." They ate in comfortable silence, then Elias headed out to check the cattle while Lin Mei tackled the week's washing. The work was the same, the routines unchanged, but underneath it all ran a current of awareness that nothing would ever be quite the same again. 3 days passed quiet. Too quiet. Elias found himself waiting for the other shoe to drop, for consequences to arrive on horseback. But the valley stayed empty except for deer and the occasional elk moving down from higher elevations as the weather turned colder. On the 4th day, Tom Walker rode up just before noon. Elias was mending fence when he spotted the horse, and his first thought was trouble. But Tom came alone, and his posture didn't suggest threat. Still, Elias kept the hammer in his hand as Tom dismounted. "Crow." Tom nodded toward the house. "Your wife around?" The word wife still sounded strange. "She's inside. Something wrong?" "Not wrong exactly. Just wanted to give you a heads up." Tom pulled an envelope from his saddlebag. "Got a letter for you. Came through yesterday on the stage. From Helena." Elias took it, recognizing the territorial government seal. His stomach tightened. "What is it?" "Official summons. You and Lin Mei need to appear before the territorial magistrate in 2 weeks. They want to verify the legitimacy of your marriage." "The hell does that mean?" "Means someone complained, filed a petition claiming the marriage was fraudulent, entered into solely to circumvent the Exclusion Act." Tom's face was grim. "They're calling it a sham." Elias felt heat rising in his chest, anger and fear mixing. "Who filed it?" "Petition doesn't say. Could be anyone. But if I had to guess..." Tom paused. "Peter Morrison was in town yesterday, making noise about how his father had been fooled, how you were making a mockery of the law. Dutch won't stand for that. Dutch is 70 years old and tired. His son's young and angry and thinks he knows better. There's only so much the old man can do." Elias looked at the letter, at the official language that boiled down to one simple truth. The world wasn't going to let them be. "What happens if we don't go?" "They'll issue a warrant, invalidate the marriage, possibly charge you both with fraud." Tom shook his head. "You have to go, Elias, and you have to convince them it's real." "It is real." "On paper, sure. But they're going to ask questions, personal questions, about your relationship, your intentions, your..." Tom stopped, uncomfortable. "Your living arrangements." Elias understood what he wasn't saying. They'd have to prove this was a genuine marriage, not a legal convenience, which meant lying about sleeping arrangements, about feelings, about the true nature of their agreement. The irony wasn't lost on him. They'd gotten married to protect Lin Mei legally, and now they had to pretend it was something more to keep that legal protection. "I'll tell her," Elias said. "There's something else." Tom pulled out a second, smaller envelope. This came too. No official seal, no return address. Someone left it at the store with instructions to give it to you private-like. Elias opened it and found a single sheet of paper with words written in careful block letters. "Your Chinese whore isn't welcome here. Send her back, or well, send her back permanent." The threat was clear, even with the poor spelling. Elias crumpled the paper, rage flooding through him so fast he saw spots. "Who brought this?" "Kid I didn't recognize. Gave him a nickel to deliver it. By the time I read it and went looking, he was gone." Tom's voice was quiet. "Elias, you need to be careful, real careful. There are people in this valley who aren't going to accept this, and they're not going to stop at letters. Let them come." "That's brave talk, but you're one man on an isolated ranch with winter coming. If someone decides to make a move, set a fire, shoot at you from the trees, you won't see it coming." "So what am I supposed to do? Run? Give up?" "I'm not saying that. I'm saying be smart. Vary your routines. Keep your rifle close. Maybe even consider staying in town for a while, where there are witnesses." "I'm not leaving my ranch." Tom sighed, the sound of a man who'd known that would be the answer. "Then at least tell Lin Mei. She deserves to know what she's facing." After Tom left, Elias stood in the yard holding two pieces of paper that represented everything wrong with the world, one demanding they prove their marriage was real, the other threatening Lin Mei's life if she didn't disappear. He wanted to burn them both, pretend they didn't exist, but pretending wouldn't make the threats less real. He found Lin Mei in the garden, harvesting the last of the root vegetables before the hard frost came. She looked up as he approached, reading something in his face. "What happened?" He handed her both letters. She read them slowly, her expression unchanging, but her hands tightened on the paper. When she finished, she folded them carefully and handed them back. "Is beginning," she said simply. "Beginning of what?" "Of them trying to break us. I see this before. In San Francisco, in railroad camp. When people decide you not belong, they push. First with words, then with law, then with—" She gestured vaguely. "With worse. I won't let them hurt you. You cannot stop everyone. You cannot be awake every hour." She pulled another turnip from the earth, shaking dirt from it. "This is why I tell you I leave if necessary. This is why I say you should be free. We're not having this conversation again. We must have this conversation. Is real now. Not just talk in town, not just paper. Is threat." She held up her hand when he started to interrupt. "I know you want to protect. I know you are a good man. But good men die too. I already lose too many people. I cannot—" Her voice cracked slightly. "I cannot be reason you die too." Elias crouched beside her in the dirt, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Listen to me. I didn't make this choice lightly. I knew there'd be consequences. I chose them anyway. You're not responsible for what other people decide to do. They are. But I am catalyst. I am reason they have rage." "No, their rage existed long before you showed up. You're just convenient target. If it wasn't you, it'd be someone else. The Dutch Morrisons of the world who married Crow women, or the Tom Walkers who sell supplies to Chinese railroad workers, or anyone else who doesn't fit in their narrow idea of how things should be." He stood, offering her his hand. "We go to Helena. We face the magistrate. We prove the marriage is legitimate. And we keep living our lives because that's the only way we win." She took his hand, let him pull her up. "You make it sound simple. It's not simple, it's just necessary." That night they talked about Helena, what questions might be asked, what answers they should give. It felt wrong, rehearsing a relationship that didn't exist, but they both understood the stakes. If the marriage was invalidated, Lin Mei would have no legal protection. She'd be vulnerable to deportation, arrest, or worse. They asked about— Lin Mei stopped, her face coloring. "About marriage bed." "What we say?" "We say it's private, none of their business. They make it their business if they think marriage is fraud." She was right. Elias rubbed his face, tired already, and the fight hadn't even started. "Then we say what they want to hear, that we share a bed, that the marriage is—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "Consummated." Lin Mei said the word clinically, like she was reading from a medical text. This is word they use. I hear it before in San Francisco. Women must prove marriage is real by proving this. That's barbaric. That is law. She stood, moved to the window, looking out at the darkness. In my country, marriage is arrangement. Family decide, couple agree, life continue. Love is bonus if it come, but not required. Here, everyone think marriage must be love story, must be romance. If not love, must be fraud. What do you think marriage should be? She was quiet for a long time. I think marriage should be partnership. Two people who help each other survive, who respect each other, who make life less hard together than apart. Love is good if it come, but respect is necessary, always. I respect you, Elias said. She turned, and in the lamplight her face looked younger, more vulnerable. I know, is why I stay, is why I marry you, even knowing is dangerous. Because you are first man who look at me and see person, not thing to use. The weight of that statement sat heavy between them. Elias wanted to say something profound, something that would ease the pain in her voice, but words felt inadequate, so he just nodded. They practiced their story for an hour, getting the details straight. How they met, through Tom Walker's referral. How long they'd known each other, almost 3 weeks now. Why they married so fast, mutual need and understanding. Where they slept, together, in the same bed. What their daily life looked like, working the ranch as partners, sharing meals, building a life. Some of it was true. Some was exaggeration. Some was outright fiction. But it would have to be enough. The 2 weeks before Helena passed in a strange suspension of time. Elias found himself hyper-aware of everything. The way Lin May moved through the house, the sound of her voice, the casual touches that happened when two people shared space. He started thinking about how it would look to an outsider, what details might betray them as frauds. Lin May seemed to have the same thoughts. She started sitting closer to him at dinner, touching his arm when she spoke, creating small intimacies that could be referenced if needed. It felt like a performance, except the audience was theoretical and the stakes were her life. On the night before they were supposed to leave for Helena, Elias couldn't sleep. He lay on his side of the hanging blanket, listening to Lin May breathe, and thought about the magistrate's questions. About having to lie. About the fact that this marriage was exactly what Peter Morrison accused it of being, a legal arrangement to circumvent an unjust law. Except it wasn't just that anymore, was it? Somewhere in the past 3 weeks, Lin May had become essential to his daily existence. He looked forward to her meals, to her quiet presence in the evening, to the way she reorganized his life with calm efficiency. He'd started thinking in terms of we instead of I, planning for two instead of one. Was that friendship, partnership, something else? He didn't know. Didn't have words for it, but he knew that the thought of her being forced to leave, of the house returning to its previous emptiness, made his chest tight with something that felt like grief. Elias? Her voice came soft through the darkness. You awake? Yeah. I am scared. The admission surprised him. She was always so controlled, so careful not to show weakness. Of tomorrow? Of what happened if we fail? If they say marriage is fraud, I have nowhere to go. Cannot stay in Montana, cannot go back to coast, cannot return to China, debt still there, men still looking. Her voice wavered. I will disappear and no one will know or care. Elias sat up, the blanket divider be damned. He could see her outline in the darkness, curled on her side of the bed. We're not going to fail. You cannot know this. I know I'm not going to let them take you. I know I'll fight every legal battle, file every appeal, make such a damn nuisance of myself that they'll wish they'd never started this. He reached across the space between them, found her hand. You're not alone in this. You understand? Whatever happens, you're not alone. Her fingers tightened on his. Why you care so much? Is just paper marriage, you say yourself, is not real. Maybe it's more real than I thought. The words came out before he could stop them, honest and raw. Maybe sharing space and sharing meals and sharing this life we're building. Maybe that's as real as anything else. Maybe the paper just made it official. Lin May was silent, but she didn't pull her hand away. They sat like that for a long moment, connected across the artificial divide they'd created. And Elias felt something shift. Not love, It was too soon for that, too complicated. But something solid, something worth protecting. Tomorrow we go to Helena, Lin Mei said finally. We tell them marriage is real. And we not lie because it is real. Different than they think, but real. Yeah, it is. She squeezed his hand once more, then released it. Try to sleep. Long ride tomorrow. But neither of them slept much. Elias could hear her shifting restlessly, and he knew she could hear him doing the same. They were two people facing a battle neither had asked for, armed with nothing but a piece of paper and the strange, fragile trust they'd built. Dawn came cold and gray, promising rain. They loaded the wagon in silence, bringing supplies for a few days in Helena. The territorial capital was 2 days' ride east, and they'd need to stay there through the hearing and however long it took to get a decision. Lin Mei wore the blue wool dress again, and she'd done something different with her hair, pinned it up in a style that looked more American, less foreign. She caught him looking and her chin came up, defensive. If I look more like them, maybe they judge less, she said. You look fine however you want to look. But I want to win, so I look like this. He couldn't argue with that logic. They climbed into the wagon and started the long journey east, leaving the ranch behind with all its familiar routines and safety. The valley had become a kind of sanctuary over the past weeks. Going back out into the world felt like stepping onto a battlefield. They stopped overnight at a way station, a rough building that offered beds and meals for travelers. The owner took one look at Lin Mei and his face closed down. We're full, he said flatly. I can see 3 empty rooms from here, Elias said. Full up, try the next station 20 miles east. It'll be dark in 2 hours, we need a room. Not my problem. The owner crossed his arms. I got the right to refuse service to anyone. That's the law. Elias felt rage building, but Lin Mei's hand on his arm stopped him. We go, she said quietly. It is not worth fight. It is worth fighting. Not tonight, please. So they drove on in the gathering darkness, and Elias felt every one of those 20 miles like a personal defeat. They reached the next station well after dark, cold and exhausted. This owner at least took their money, though he put them in the room farthest from everyone else and charged double the normal rate. They collapsed into the single bed. No divider here, just shared exhaustion. Elias was too angry and too tired to care about propriety. Lin Mei curled up on her side, facing away from him, and he could feel tension radiating off her in waves. I'm sorry, he said into the darkness. For what? You not refuse us room. You not charge extra. You not make me feel shame. Her voice was bitter. This is world. I know this world. You cannot apologize for it. I can apologize for not making it better. She rolled over to face him, though he could barely see her in the darkness. You make it better by being here, by not giving up, by driving 20 extra miles when you could leave me on road and go back to easy life. My life was never easy, and it wasn't worth much before you showed up. You say this now. Wait until tomorrow. Wait until they ask hard questions and you must lie to strangers to protect woman you barely know. Then see if you still think is worth it. I'll still think it's worth it. You are stubborn, man. You're a stubborn woman. We match. He heard her breath catch. Might have been a laugh or might have been a sob. Then she moved closer, not touching, but near enough that he could feel her warmth. I am glad as you. If I must do this, face magistrate, fight for right to stay, I am glad as you beside me. Nowhere else I'd rather be. That was a lie, of course. He'd rather be back at the ranch, living their quiet life, unbothered by laws and prejudice, and people who thought they had the right to decide how others should live. But if this battle was necessary, he was glad to fight it with her. They reached Helena the next afternoon, riding into a city that made Millerville look like a trading post. Buildings 3 stories tall lined wide streets, telegraph wires strung between poles, people everywhere moving with purpose. Lin Mei shrank beside him, overwhelmed. So many people, she said, just means more witnesses if someone tries something. They found a boarding house that would take them, barely. The landlady looked at Lin Mei with open disdain but accepted Elias's money. The room was small and plain, 1 bed and a washstand, but it would do. The hearing was set for the next morning at the territorial courthouse. They had 1 evening to prepare, to get their story straight, to become the couple they needed to be on paper. That night, Elias sat on the bed while Lin Mei paced the small room, too nervous to be still. What if I say wrong thing? What if my English not good enough? What if they ask question I not understand? Then I'll help you. We're in this together. They can separate us, interview us alone, make sure stories match. Then we tell the truth as much as possible. Truth is easier to remember than lies. She stopped pacing, looked at him with those fierce, dark eyes. Truth is we marry for protection. Truth is we sleep with blanket between us. Truth is we partners, not lovers. You want to tell magistrate this truth? No. I want to tell him we married because we chose to, because we found something worth building together, because in a hard world, we decided to make things a little less hard for each other. That's all truth. Lin Mei sat down beside him on the bed, close enough that their shoulders touched. You are better with words than you think. I just try to be honest. Honest is good. Honest is rare. She leaned against him slightly, seeking comfort, or offering it. Elias wasn't sure which. Tomorrow, we be honest as we can. We show them marriage is real, even if different than they expect, and we hope is enough. It'll be enough. You keep saying this, like saying it makes it true. Maybe it does. Maybe that's all we've got, saying it until it's true. They sat together in the small rented room, two people on the edge of something that would either validate their choice or tear it apart. Outside, Helena hummed with evening activity, indifferent to their fate. Inside, they held on to each other and whatever fragile thing they'd built, hoping it would be strong enough to survive tomorrow. When they finally lay down to sleep, there was no blanket divider, no pretense of separate spaces, just two people in a bed, back to back, drawing strength from proximity and the simple fact of not being alone. Elias fell asleep thinking about the questions that would come, the performance they'd have to give, the lies that weren't quite lies. But underneath it all was a deeper truth he was only beginning to understand. Somewhere in the past 3 weeks, Lin Mei had stopped being a stranger he was helping and become someone he couldn't imagine losing. Whether that was enough to convince a magistrate, he didn't know. But it was enough to make him willing to try. The courthouse was a 3-story brick building that dominated Helena's main street, imposing and official in ways designed to make ordinary people feel small. Elias and Lin Mei climbed the stone steps together, her hand tucked into the crook of his arm, not for show, but because she was shaking and trying to hide it. Inside, they were directed to a waiting room on the 2nd floor. The wooden benches were hard and uncomfortable, clearly meant to discourage lingering. 2 other couples sat waiting for their own hearings, both white, both looking at Lin Mei like she'd brought disease into the room. A clerk appeared after 20 minutes that felt like hours. Crow and wife? They stood together. The clerk looked Lin Mei up and down with undisguised contempt, then gestured toward a heavy oak door. Magistrate Caldwell will see you now. The hearing room was smaller than Elias expected, more like an office than a courtroom. Magistrate Caldwell sat behind a massive desk, a man in his 60s with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. To his right sat a court recorder, pen poised. To his left, another man Elias didn't recognize, younger, maybe 40, with the look of someone who enjoyed finding flaws in other people's paperwork. Mr. Crow, Mrs. Crow. Caldwell gestured to 2 chairs facing the desk. Please sit. They sat, and Elias felt Lin Mei's hand find his under the desk, gripping tight. He squeezed back, trying to communicate confidence he didn't feel. Caldwell opened a folder, scanning documents. I've reviewed your marriage certificate and the petition filed challenging its legitimacy. The petitioner claims this union was entered into fraudulently for the sole purpose of circumventing the Chinese Exclusion Act. How do you respond to that allegation? It's false, Elias said. We married because we wanted to build a life together. After knowing each other for approximately 10 days. 11 days at the time of marriage. Almost 4 weeks now. The younger man leaned forward. I'm Mr. Hastings, Territorial Legal Counsel. Mr. Crow, you're asking us to believe that you fell in love with a Chinese woman you'd known for less than 2 weeks and married her despite significant social and legal complications. That strains credulity. I didn't say anything about love. I said we wanted to build a life together. Those aren't the same thing. Caldwell's eyebrow raised. You're claiming this isn't a love match? I'm claiming it's a partnership based on mutual respect and practical need. My wife needed protection and stability. I needed. Elias paused, choosing words carefully. I needed a reason to stop living like I was already dead. We found something valuable in each other. That's basis enough for marriage in my book. The law requires more than practical arrangement, Hastings said. The law requires genuine marital intent, cohabitation, consummation, the full rights and responsibilities of marriage. Lin May's hand tightened on Elias's, but her voice came out steady. We share home. We share bed. We share life. What more you need? Hastings turned his attention to her, his expression calculating. Mrs. Crow, tell me about your journey to Montana. How did you come to be at Mr. Crow's ranch? I come from San Francisco. Work on railroad for 1 year. When work finish, I need new place. I hear Montana have space, not many people. I think maybe I start new life there. And you chose Mr. Crow's ranch specifically why? Man in town say Elias Crow is fair, say he live far, alone, maybe need help with house. I go there, offer to work. He let me stay. For 11 days before marrying you. Yes? What happened in those 11 days to convince you both that marriage was appropriate? Lin May looked at Elias, then back at Hastings. We talk. We work together. We learn we can trust each other. In my country, people marry faster than this. Marriage is not always about long courtship. It's about finding person you can build life with. Caldwell made a note. Mrs. Crow, are you aware that under the Chinese Exclusion Act, Chinese laborers are prohibited from entering the United States? That marriages entered into solely to evade this law are considered fraudulent? I know this law, but I not laborer when I marry Elias. I am woman looking for home. Marriage is real, not trick. Yet you benefit considerably from this arrangement. You gain legal protection, the right to remain in the territory, and the social status of a married woman. What does Mr. Crow gain? The question hung in the air, implying things that made Elias's jaw tighten. Before he could respond, Lin May spoke. He gained partner, he gained person who care about his home, his life, his future. You think this is small thing? You think man who live alone for 6 years not need this? Her voice grew stronger, more forceful. I cook his food. I mend his clothes. I make his house into home. But more than this, I give him reason to live instead of just survive. This is not nothing. This is everything. Hastings wasn't impressed. Touching speech, Mrs. Crow, but it sounds rehearsed, like something you prepared to say when questioned. Of course I prepare, Lin May shot back. You think I not know this hearing is attack? That people want to destroy my marriage because they not like Chinese woman marry white man? I prepare because I must fight for my life. You sit there with your power and your judgment, but you not understand what is to have nothing, to be nothing, in eyes of law. So yes, I prepare my words. But words are true. Caldwell held up a hand. Mrs. Crow, no one is attacking you personally. We're simply ensuring the law is upheld. Law is already against me. Chinese Exclusion Act say I cannot be here. But I am here. I survive. I find man who see me as person, not thing. We marry legal, proper, with witnesses. What more law need? The law needs proof of genuine marital intent, Hastings repeated. Mr. Crow, I'd like to interview you separately. Mrs. Crow, please wait outside. Elias stood immediately. No, we answer questions together or not at all. That's not how this works. Then tell me the law that says you can separate us. Show me the statute that gives you that authority. Elias's voice was hard, controlled anger bleeding through. You want to verify our stories match? Fine. Ask your questions with both of us present. But I'm not letting you intimidate my wife while I'm stuck in another room. Caldwell and Hastings exchanged glances. Finally, Caldwell said, Very well. We'll continue together. But understand, Mr. Crow, your defensiveness isn't helping your case. I'm not being defensive, I'm being protective. There's a difference. The questioning continued for another hour, probing and invasive. They asked about sleeping arrangements, daily routines, future plans. They asked Lin May about her past, where she'd lived, what work she'd done, why she'd left San Francisco. Each question felt designed to find inconsistencies, to trap them in lies. But they stuck to their story, backing each other up, presenting a united front. Yes, they shared a bed. Yes, they planned to build a life together. Yes, the marriage was real, even if it had started unconventionally. Finally, Caldwell closed his folder. I've heard enough for now. I'll need to deliberate and review the evidence. You'll have my decision by end of day tomorrow. Tomorrow? Elias couldn't keep the frustration from his voice. We came all this way and you can't decide today? Justice isn't instantaneous, Mr. Crow. I have other cases to consider, and this matter requires careful thought. You're dismissed. They left the courthouse into afternoon sunlight that felt wrong after the dim, oppressive hearing room. Lin Mei was silent until they reached the boarding house. Then she collapsed onto the bed and covered her face with her hands. That was horrible. You were brilliant, Elias said. The way you stood up to Hastings. I was angry. I say too much, too honest. Maybe I ruin everything. You didn't ruin anything. You showed them we're real people, not just names on paper. He sat beside her, close enough to offer comfort. Whatever Caldwell decides, we did our best. What if best is not enough? He didn't have an answer for that. They spent the rest of the day in tense limbo, unable to relax or plan beyond the next 24 hours. That evening, they ate dinner at a small restaurant that grudgingly served them, then walked the streets of Helena as darkness fell. I never see city this big, Lin Mei said, watching gas lamps flicker to life along the main street. San Francisco bigger, but I'm not free to walk there. Always hiding, always afraid. This is first time I walk beside man and not feel shame. You should never feel shame, not for surviving, not for anything. You say this because you are you, but worlds say different. She stopped walking, turning to face him under a street lamp's golden glow. Elias, if magistrates say marriage is fraud, if they make me leave, I want you to know something. Don't. We're not doing goodbye speeches. Listen, please. She took his hands, holding them firmly. You give me gift. These weeks with you, I feel like person again. Not ghost, not thing to use, not invisible. You see me, you respect me, you fight for me when you not have to. This is gift I never forget, no matter what happened tomorrow. Elias felt something crack in his chest, some wall he'd built after Sarah died. Lin Mei, you not have to say anything. I just want you to know. If I must leave, I leave grateful. I leave knowing there are still good men in the world. Knowing that maybe, someday, I can trust again because I trust you. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her in the middle of Helena's main street where anyone could see. She stiffened for a moment, then relaxed against him, her head resting on his shoulder. They stood like that for a long moment, two people holding on to each other against whatever the next day might bring. When they returned to the boarding house, the landlady had news. Message came for you, from the courthouse. Elias's heart sank. Already? Came an hour ago. Said to tell you the hearing's been moved up. 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, final decision to be rendered immediately after. They barely slept that night. Every time Elias drifted off, he'd wake to find Lin Mei staring at the ceiling, lost in thoughts she didn't share. Around 3 in the morning, she finally spoke into the darkness. If they say yes, if they approve marriage, what then? Then we go home. We live our lives. And if people still make trouble, still send threats, then we deal with it, together. You say together like it's simple. It is simple, hard but simple. We're partners. That means we face things together. She rolled toward him, and even in the darkness, he could feel the intensity of her gaze. Partners can become more. You know this, yes? His breath caught. Yes. I not say this happen. I not promise anything, but maybe, if we have time, if we survive this, maybe we become more than paper marriage. Maybe we already are. She was quiet for a moment, then her hand found his in the darkness. You are strange, stubborn man, Elias Crow, but I am grateful you let me set 2 plates at your table. Best decision I never made. You didn't exactly ask permission. If I ask permission, you say no. Probably. So I not ask, I just stay, and you let me. She squeezed his hand. This is our story. Not love at first sight, not romance. Just 2 broken people who decide to be broken together instead of broken alone. That might be the most honest thing anyone's ever said about marriage. Honest is all I have left to give. They fell asleep like that. hands linked, and when morning came, they faced it together. The courthouse was less crowded at 8 in the morning. They were ushered directly into Caldwell's chambers, where the magistrate sat with Hastings and another man Elias didn't recognize, older, distinguished, with the bearing of someone used to authority. "Mr. and Mrs. Crow," Caldwell began, "this is Territorial Governor Potts. He's asked to be present for the decision given the sensitive nature of this case." Governor Potts nodded at them. "I've reviewed your file. Quite the controversy you've stirred up." "Wasn't our intention to stir anything," Elias said. "Perhaps not. But intention and result are often different things." Potts leaned back in his chair. "I've read Magistrate Caldwell's assessment and Mr. Hastings' recommendations. I've also received letters from several citizens of Millerville, some supporting you, some quite viciously opposed. We didn't ask anyone to write letters." "No, but they wrote them anyway. Tom Walker speaks highly of your character, Mr. Crow. Dutch Morrison, interestingly, submitted a letter explaining the historical context of interracial marriages in Montana Territory. Quite informative." Potts glanced at his notes. "On the other hand, we have 17 letters calling for the marriage to be invalidated and Mrs. Crow to be deported immediately. Several include threats of violence should you return to Millerville." Lin May's hand found Elias's under the table, gripping tight. "After reviewing all the evidence," Caldwell said, "I've reached a decision. The marriage between Elias Crow and Lin May is—" He paused, and in that pause Elias felt his entire future hanging. "Legally valid and binding. I find no evidence of fraud or intent to circumvent the Exclusion Act. The union, while unconventional, meets all legal requirements for a legitimate marriage." Relief flooded through Elias so fast he felt dizzy. Beside him, Lin May made a small sound, might have been a sob or a laugh. "However," Potts interjected, and the relief curdled into dread. "However, validating this marriage doesn't solve the larger problem. Mrs. Crow, you are Chinese. The Exclusion Act, while not prohibiting you from remaining married to a citizen, does create significant complications. There are people who will never accept your presence in Montana Territory, people who may act on their prejudices in violent ways." "We understand the risks," Elias said. "Do you? Mr. Crow, you're a war veteran. You have rights and standing in this territory. But those won't protect you from a bullet fired from the trees or a fire set in the night. And they certainly won't protect your wife." Potts leaned forward. "I'm going to be blunt with you both. I cannot guarantee your safety. The territorial government has limited resources and unlimited problems. If you choose to return to Millerville, to your isolated ranch, you will be largely on your own." "We've always been on our own," Lin May said quietly. "This is not new." "Perhaps. But now you have legal standing to remain together, which makes you both more visible and more vulnerable." Potts pulled out a document. "I'm issuing this certificate affirming the legitimacy of your marriage. Keep it with you at all times. If anyone questions Mrs. Crow's right to be here, show them this. It won't stop prejudice, but it will stop legal harassment." Caldwell slid another paper across the desk. "I'm also issuing a protective order against Peter Morrison specifically. He was the primary petitioner challenging your marriage. If he or anyone acting on his behalf threatens or harms either of you, they'll face territorial prosecution." "That might make things worse," Elias said. "Give him more reason to— or it might make him think twice." Potts stood, signaling the meeting was over. "You've won your legal battle, Mr. and Mrs. Crow. Now you have to win the harder battle, building a life in a place that doesn't want you. I wish I could offer more than paper and good wishes, but that's all I have to give." They left the courthouse with 2 documents that changed everything and nothing. The marriage was valid, Lin May could stay. But the threats were real, and winter was coming, and they were heading back to a valley where at least 17 people had written letters calling for their destruction. "We don't have to go back," Elias said as they loaded the wagon. "We could go somewhere else. Denver maybe, or California. Somewhere bigger, where we'd be less visible." Lin May shook her head. "That ranch is your home. You build it with your hands. I will not let them take it from you." "It's just land and wood. We could build somewhere else." "No, we run too much already, both of us. We go back. We live our lives. We show them we not afraid." She climbed into the wagon, her jaw set with determination. "Maybe we fail. Maybe they win. But we not surrender before battle even start." Elias looked at this woman who'd walked into his house uninvited and changed everything. This woman who'd survived horrors he could barely imagine and still had the courage to fight for a future. She was right. Running would solve nothing. They'd just be carrying their fear to new ground. "All right," he said, "we go home." The 2-day journey back to Millerville was quieter than the journey to Helena, but different somehow. They'd left as two people bound by paper and convenience. They returned as something more, partners who'd fought together, survived together, chosen each other repeatedly when giving up would have been easier. At night, when they stopped to make camp, Lin May didn't sleep on the opposite side of the fire anymore. She stayed close, and Elias found himself grateful for the warmth of another person, for the simple comfort of not being alone. On the afternoon of the second day, as the familiar peaks of their valley came into view, Lin May said, "When we get back, I want to plant garden for spring. Real garden, not just vegetables. Flowers, too. Make the ranch beautiful." "Flowers are impractical." "So?" "I am impractical woman. I marry stranger. I fight territorial government. I go back to place where people want me dead. Flowers are least impractical thing I do." Elias smiled despite himself. "Plant whatever you want. It's your home, too." "Our home," she corrected. "Not yours, not mine. Ours." They reached the ranch as the sun was setting, painting everything in that golden October light that made even rough places look holy. The house stood exactly as they'd left it, but it felt different now. Not just shelter, but something they were building together. That night, they fell into familiar routines with new awareness. Lin May cooked dinner while Elias tended the animals. They ate together, talking about winter preparations and spring plans and the work that would fill the months ahead. When it came time for bed, the hanging blanket stayed folded in the corner. They'd stopped pretending they needed that division. 3 days after their return, Dutch Morrison rode up to the ranch. Elias met him in the yard, hand near his rifle, but not on it. "Came to tell you in person," Dutch said without preamble. "Peter's gone. Left the territory yesterday. Said he couldn't live in a place that was falling to—" He stopped, shook his head. "Said some ugly things, but he's gone. Won't be causing you trouble anymore." Relief and something like sadness washed over Elias. "I'm sorry it came to that between you and your son." "I'm not. Boy needed to learn that you can't build a life on hate. If Montana won't teach him that, maybe somewhere else will." Dutch looked toward the house where Lin May had appeared in the doorway. "You take care of each other. Country's changing. Some people can't handle that. But those of us who can, we gotta stick together." "Thank you, Dutch, for everything. Thank Tom Walker when you see him. He's the one who organized the letter-writing campaign in your favor. Got half the town to write to Helena." Dutch smiled slightly. "Other half wrote the hate letters, but half's better than nothing." After Dutch left, Elias told Lin May about Peter's departure. She listened quietly, then said, "Is not victory. Just one enemy less. There will be others. Probably. But we'll handle them when they come." Winter arrived 2 weeks later, and with it, the isolation they'd both expected. Snow buried the valley, cutting them off from town, from neighbors, from everything except each other and the work of survival. They fell into rhythms shaped by necessity and choice. Mornings spent tending animals and hauling wood, afternoons working on projects inside, evenings by the fire. Lin May taught Elias words in her language, and he taught her better English. They played cards using a deck from Sarah's trunk, and Lin May's competitive streak emerged in ways that made him laugh. She was a terrible loser and a worse winner, celebrating victories with theatrical enthusiasm that seemed designed to annoy him. "You cheat," he accused after she won the 5th hand in a row. "I not cheat. I just better at cards than you." "Nobody's that much better." "I am." She gathered the cards with exaggerated smugness. "In San Francisco, I play cards with railroad workers. They teach me all the tricks." "You just admitted to cheating. Knowing tricks is not cheating, is being smart." They bickered like that often, neither one willing to concede points, both finding something comforting in the normalcy of petty arguments. It felt married in ways that had nothing to do with legal papers and everything to do with shared life. On Christmas morning, Elias woke to find Lin May had made something special for breakfast. She wouldn't say what it was called, just that her mother had made it for celebrations. It was sweet and filled with bean paste, and unlike anything he'd tasted, and when he told her it was good, she blushed with pleasure. "I make you gift," she said, pulling something from her pocket. "Is not much." She handed him a piece of fabric, one of his old shirts, carefully embroidered with a pattern of mountains and trees. The stitching was intricate, beautiful. Hours of work condensed into something small and perfect. "Lin Mei, this is—" He couldn't finish, too moved to speak. "You give me home. I give you this. Is not same value, but is what I have." He pulled out the package he'd hidden in the barn, suddenly worried his gift was inadequate. Inside was a coat he'd bought in Helena before they'd left. Heavy wool lined with fur, made for Montana winters, made for someone he wanted to keep warm. She put it on immediately, despite being inside, and spun around to show him. "Is perfect. I am most warm Chinese woman in Montana." "You're the only Chinese woman in Montana, far as I know." "Then I am most warm and most beautiful." She said it lightly, joking, but there was vulnerability underneath. "You are beautiful," Elias said, and meant it. Somewhere in the past months, he'd stopped seeing her as foreign or different, and started seeing her as simply Lin Mei, the woman who'd invaded his house and his life and made both better for being there. She looked at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. Then she crossed the space between them and kissed him. It was brief, tentative, a question more than a statement. Elias froze, surprised, then kissed her back with equal care. When they pulled apart, they stared at each other, navigating new territory neither had planned to enter. "Is this," Lin Mei started, "is okay? More than okay, if you want it to be." "I want, but we go slow. I am not good at this. Trust is," she gestured helplessly, "is hard for me." "We go slow," Elias agreed. "We've got time." And they did. The winter gave them months of slow discovery, of learning each other in ways that had nothing to do with survival and everything to do with choice. The paper marriage became something real, not through grand gestures, but through small moments. Shared warmth on cold nights, comfortable silence while working, laughter over card games and burned dinners, and the 1,000 tiny failures and successes of daily life. Spring came eventually, as it always did. The snow melted, revealing the valley in shades of green and brown. Lin Mei planted her garden, flowers and vegetables side by side, practical and impractical growing together. One morning in late April, as Elias was mending fence, Lin Mei came running from the house with news that made his heart stop. "I am pregnant." The world tilted. He'd known it was possible, but knowing and confronting the reality were different things. "You're sure?" "I am sure. 3 months, maybe. I not say anything because I not want to worry if I am wrong. But I'm sure now. A baby. Their baby." The thought filled him with terror and joy in equal measure. Sarah had died giving birth. The memory was still vivid enough to cut. Lin Mei saw the fear on his face and took his hands. "I know you're scared. I am scared too. But I'm also strong. I survive many things. I will survive this. We need a doctor. We need time. Baby not come until October, maybe November. We have months to prepare." She pulled him close. "We do this together, yes?" "Like everything else." "Together," he agreed, holding her tight. The months that followed were filled with preparation and worry and surprising joy. Lin Mei's body changed, and with it their relationship deepened. Elias found himself constantly protective, constantly anxious, constantly amazed by this woman who faced pregnancy with the same fierce determination she faced everything. In August, they made the trip to town for supplies. The reception was mixed. Some people pointedly ignored them, others offered cautious congratulations. Sarah Murphy, the schoolteacher, stopped them on the street. "Heard about the baby," she said. "I was wrong about you two. I thought you were making a mistake. But I see the way you look at each other now, and—" She paused, choosing words carefully. "I see something real, so congratulations. And if you need anything, you let me know." It wasn't much, but it was something, a crack in the wall of disapproval. Tom Walker loaded them up with supplies and refused payment for half of it. "For the baby," he insisted. "Every child deserves a good start." They returned to the ranch laden with gifts and goodwill, fragile and unexpected. The valley that had seemed hostile in autumn now felt almost welcoming. or at least neutral. They'd survived long enough to become familiar, if not fully accepted. In early November, on a night when the first real snow was falling, Lin May's labor began. Elias had brought Sarah Murphy out 2 weeks earlier. She'd assisted in births before and agreed to stay until the baby came. Now, listening to Lin May's cries from the bedroom, Elias paced the main room like a caged animal. "She's strong," Sarah said quietly. "The baby's positioned well. This is normal." "Sarah, my wife, she died doing this." "I know, but Lin May isn't Sarah. Every birth is different." She touched his arm. "Have faith." Hours passed, each one feeling like eternity. Then, just before dawn, a new sound joined Lin May's cries, the sharp, indignant wail of a newborn. Sarah emerged from the bedroom, smiling. "You have a daughter. Mother and baby are both healthy." Elias stumbled into the room, his legs weak with relief. Lin May lay in the bed, exhausted and radiant, holding a tiny bundle. She looked up at him with tears streaming down her face. "We have daughter," she said unnecessarily. He sat beside her, looking at the tiny face, eyes shut tight, mouth open in outrage at being born. She had Lin May's dark hair and his nose, a blend of both worlds, impossible and perfect. "What do we name her?" he asked. "I think Sarah Lin." Lin May looked at him carefully. "To honor woman who was here first, and to honor my family," both parts of her story. Elias felt tears burning in his eyes. He'd never expected to heal from losing Sarah, but somehow, holding this new Sarah, he felt something shift. Not forgetting, but accepting. Not replacing, but honoring. "Sarah Lynn Crow," he said. "It's perfect." The baby quieted in her mother's arms, and the three of them sat together as dawn broke over the valley, filling the room with light. The years that followed weren't easy. Prejudice didn't disappear, and there were still people who made their disapproval known. But Elias and Lin May built their life stubbornly, brick by brick, choice by choice. They raised Sarah Lynn and later her brother James, teaching them to be proud of both halves of their heritage, to stand firm against those who said they didn't belong. The ranch prospered. Lin May's efficiency and innovation turned it into one of the most productive in the valley. She introduced farming techniques from her homeland, managed their finances with precision, and slowly won over neighbors through sheer competence and persistence. By the time Sarah Lynn was 10, the Crow Ranch was known throughout Montana Territory, not as the place where that white man married that Chinese woman, but as the place that weathered every storm and came out stronger. On their 10th anniversary, Elias and Lin May sat on the porch they'd rebuilt together, watching their children play in the yard. The garden Lin May had insisted on planting that first spring had grown wild and beautiful, flowers mixing with vegetables in joyful chaos. "You regret it?" Elias asked. The question they'd promised to revisit after a year, now 10 years later. Lin May leaned against him, comfortable and certain. "I regret nothing. You?" "Not a damn thing." "Good," she smiled, "because I still have 5 more plates to set at table tonight, and I need you to help." He laughed, remembering that first night when she'd set 2 plates like she had every right to stay. She'd been right to be that bold, right to take that risk. Sometimes the best things in life started with someone walking uninvited into your house and refusing to leave. They'd built something impossible together, a marriage that started as paper and became real, a family that shouldn't exist according to the laws and prejudices of their time, a home that stood firm against everyone who said it couldn't last. The woman who crossed the line had done more than survive. She'd thrived. They both had. And years later, when people asked Sarah Lynn about her parents' love story, she'd tell them the truth. It didn't start with love. It started with defiance, with 2 broken people who decided to be unbroken together, with a Chinese woman who set 2 plates at a stranger's table, and a man who chose partnership over loneliness. The love came later, built slowly through shared work and shared risk, and the daily choice to keep choosing each other. But it came, strong and enduring, proving that the best foundations weren't built on passion or romance, but on respect, trust, and the stubborn refusal to let the world tell you who you could become. That was their legacy. Not just survival, but transformation. Not just endurance, but triumph. 2 outcasts who built a family that would stand for generations, rooted in Montana soil and fed by two cultures, impossible and undeniable, and completely, fiercely real.